In this video, I'm going to explain one of the key characteristics of feedback loops, the ability to control them through monitoring and manipulating key variables, and how we've been able to fight climate change in the past. Let's jump back to science for a brief moment. So, one of the great things about feedback loops for engineers is that because they influence themselves, we can actually grab almost anything in that loop and apply controls to it in order to manipulate the behaviour of the loop. To boil a lot of stuff down into very basic terms and probably annoy all my control engineering lecturers from uni, we can influence a loop with a combination of three types of control: proportional, integral, and derivative. We can think of proportional control as the blunt instrument of control engineering. This allows us to say we generally want the output to increase or decrease. In terms of climate change control, this would be akin to an industry-wide target: 20% reduced emissions by 2025. Integral control is where we take the history of our output into account. We have a target we want to reach, and we carefully monitor how we've been doing in the past to see if we need to do some more work in order to reach our target. In terms of climate change control, this would be similar to ongoing industry regulation based on key performance indicators. Derivative control is where we monitor the rate of change in our output and act based on that. So, if we suddenly see a ramp up in our output, we know that action needs to be taken, and we would apply that immediately. In terms of climate change control, this would be like ongoing monitoring of our climate situation, and having legislation in place that would allow for emergency regulation in the event of a sudden spike. Let's take a look at one of the best known examples of controls being introduced and successfully dealing with climate change: the hole in the ozone layer. Caused by CFC gases once used in refrigerators, during the latter half of the 20th century this was a grave global concern. After the identification of the growing threat of ozone layer depletion and isolation of the cause in the 1970s, the Montreal Protocol was enacted in the late 1980s in a bid to control the causes and effects of ozone layer depletion. It was able to do this through some relatively basic controls that targeted a number of different parts of the loop to achieve the overall desired result. First and foremost, prohibition of CFC and other related ozone harmful substances in the construction of new items. Phasing these materials out of production can be considered an integral type control, as restrictions were managed gradually and over time. Not only did such an approach have a direct impact on the quantity of CFCs released into the atmosphere, it also maintained stability in the system by slowly inducing the change, allowing manufacturers to adjust their methods in stages rather than face potentially prohibitive costs of an instant step change. Secondly, a multilateral fund was set up to assist developing countries in reducing CFC output. This is another integral control, assessing the needs of the participating country and reducing the cost burden on manufacturers within the country. The real beauty of this control is that it doesn't directly impact the reduction in CFC output, but it removes an economic barrier, allowing the participating nation to reduce their CFC output in line with the other control measure, showing us in an almost perfect example the interlinked and indirect nature of climate change cause and effect. Thirdly, the Montreal Protocols themselves provide a legal framework that encourages governments to adhere to the agreements and to take action against manufacturers that do not comply. This can be considered a combination of integral and derivative controls, as action is taken based on collected historical evidence and constant monitoring of the current state of the ozone layer. This regulation, based on the input of official monitors, distributed researchers, and citizen scientists accessing publicly available atmospheric data, allows relatively small groups of people to enact big changes by leveraging the laws. The combination of these controls, applied in a timely manner, has allowed the ozone layer to begin replenishing itself, and on average the hole is now reducing in size. It'll take some time to be completely restored, but as long as the Montreal Protocol is in place and is adhered to, it'll get there. We can also look at the role that education has to play in climate change. It's a fundamental part of dealing with climate change, there can be no doubt, but all campaigns to raise awareness of it, this video included, cannot be considered controls on the causes of climate change, and this needs to be factored into our strategies. It's not enough to simply tell people about what climate change is and why we should be concerned, and just hope that people go off and do something about it. We need to be able to structure our message with all the data and stories we've accumulated to point them towards collective action. People need to know that their voices can be heard better as groups, that climate change can be affected by more than just directly cleaning up pollution, and that they can use existing laws to amplify their impact. We need to be able to show people that they can succeed, and that there is hope for the future. That's all there is for this video. I've got just one more video for you to wrap everything up and summarise all that I've spoken about. Stay tuned for the final video, Weave a New Pattern.